Hey guys, coming back at you from Therapy Rocks YouTube channel, and we're specifically talking about symptoms of complex PTSD as listed in the booklet, The Upset That Comes with Little. If you like what you're seeing, please like and subscribe so that these videos can get out and help more people. If you want a copy of the book, just let me know and I will make sure that I get you a copy in the mail as soon as possible. So today we're talking about shame and fear-based thinking. That is a huge symptom for folks that have complex PTSD. And really it's pretty, it's a simple concept that when you grow up in a home where you're being abused or neglected on a regular basis, you're going to end up feeling a huge amount of fear and shame. Okay, and parents that parent that way will actually inspire that in you to have a lot of fear-based thinking and shame-based thinking. So let's say you grow up in a home with a parent who's a rager, but they also take you to church all the time, and they also are like obsessively religious. Okay, so you've got this parent who's raging all the time at home, who uses relational consequences, which are, I'm not going to punish you, I'm not necessarily going to give you a natural consequence, I'm going to give you a relational consequence, which means I'm going to get angry at you, I'm going to scream and yell at you and tell you to get out of my face. Relational consequences harm the relationship between you and the child. Natural consequences like, you weren't home on time, so you can't go stay at Susie's house this weekend. That's a natural consequence, and it doesn't involve shame and fear. Okay, so that's one way that parents can instill that. But it is definitely instilled in early childhood years from parents who are dysfunctional or abusive or just not present or neglectful. And when we talk about it in this book, we talk about it as the internalized perpetrator part, or the inner critic. When a child lives in that kind of environment for long enough, they know they're trapped, they know they can't go anywhere, they can't get away, it doesn't even enter their mind because it's not possible. When you're a child, you're stuck where you are until you're old enough to leave. So when children grow up in this kind of environment, they have to adapt, they have to survive. So many times they will have a part that develops inside that thinks and behaves and has attitudes very similar to the perpetrator. And actually, it's a protector part. It's a part that is formed to keep the other parts down and protected, because if I can keep you scared and I can keep you shamed, then you won't get hurt by someone else. And so it's a very distorted way of thinking, but that's what happens in early childhood in an effort for the child to survive. So if you have an internalized perpetrator part, then you've got those ideas and those concepts and those attitudes that were internalized from the perpetrator. And if it happened at a very young age, then it's difficult to challenge some of those beliefs. I've had many patients who, and mostly men, I don't know what that's about, and I haven't given that a lot of thought, who have decided that they hate dogs. They just hate dogs. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know any little kid who doesn't love a puppy. And when a child hates a dog, it's because the parent that brought them up hated dogs, and it maybe abused dogs in front of them. And that child was forced to identify with the perpetrator to survive. So that's just an example, that shame, the shame and fear-based thinking, obviously shame is a huge part of trauma. And so, in the booklet, we talk about the shame cycle and how, something will get activated, a person will regress and get little, maybe overreact, and then get hit with shame and fear. So it keeps people really stuck in their recovery. And it's an important part to really be on the lookout for, and to start to work with gently. Work with yourself gently, because this part has been around for a long time, and its job was to protect you, believe it or not, because all parts have a positive intention. And so when you see it come up, we just gently work with that part, and we notice it, and we remind ourselves that it's okay now that we're big to give ourselves grace, that mistakes can be forgiven, that mistakes can be fixed, and there's no reason for shame, and there's no reason for fear. Okay? So the next one, and it kind of goes along with this, is self-hatred and self-harm. So self-hatred, again, that's the work of the inner critic. It's really the work of the inner critic to develop that self-hatred. No child is born hateful, deserving to be called hateful. Okay? Or to be harmed. Self-harm is a way that trauma survivors cope with emotional flashbacks and horrible, intense feelings. I think Bessel van der Kolk, no, it was Onno van der Hart in his book called The Haunted Self, talks about the concept of vehement emotions. That when a trauma survivor gets activated, the emotions that come up are so intense, more intense than anybody who's healthy would understand. That these emotions come up, and that's you've got to do something with them. And so a lot of times that's why survivors will cut, or self-harm, because when you cut or self-harm, it actually produces in your system the equivalent of about 8 milligrams of morphine. And so you go into a place where you're feeling a little calmer. And so that's why people get addicted to cutting and self-harming, because it produces this opioid, endogenous opioid it's called, effect in the body. So they, in essence, become addicted to their own body chemicals. Obviously, we don't want that happening. Obviously, we don't want survivors hurting themselves or hating themselves, because it gets in the way of recovery. So give yourself some grace. If you see any of these symptoms, try not to shame yourself. These are ways that you learn, these are very creative ways that you learn to cope with an unbearable situation. Okay. Poor self-care is the last one I have on the list. We'll just finish that, and then we'll be done with the symptoms. Poor self-care. Obviously, many survivors don't take very good care of themselves, mostly because they're so dissociated they don't notice things. They're always in survival mode. They're always dysregulated. They're always in, hyperarousal or hypoarousal. They're not fully present. And so they don't notice that, oh my gosh, I'm stacking this cord of wood and my back is hurting, so maybe I should stop. They keep going until they physically hurt themselves. Survivors, rarely do I see a trauma survivor who hasn't had some pretty bad injury to the body. I myself have had 2 lower back surgeries, 2 laminectomies, because I was the type of person, and I can still tend to be this way. I don't know when to stop. So poor self-care can show up in lots of different ways. Poor boundaries. You're taking care of everyone else but yourself. And somehow you should get a badge for that at some point, and when you don't, you're shocked that you've been codependent your whole life, taking care of other people, and lo and behold, they don't want to take care of you. So poor self-care is a big issue. Trauma survivors tend to overdo and get into trouble with that, and over time, this really takes a toll on the body physically. There's a huge correlation between early childhood trauma and autoimmune disorders. That's something I don't have, so I'm very proud of that. So exercise, stretching, um, walking, gentle things help get some of the charged energy out of your system in a healthy way if it's done on a repetitive basis. So find a way to discharge some of that emotion that gets trapped in the body. Massage is also a very wonderful way of getting some of that emotion out of your body. Because the emotion, people are talking nowadays, I haven't really researched this, but I thought it was fascinating, that trauma is stored in the fascia tissue in your body. And so some chiropractors are doing scraping. I mean, we call it scraping. I'm sure it's got a better word for it, but it breaks up the fascia tissue. And some people have told me they've gone in for this treatment and ended up feeling a lot of emotion release. And the same with massage. So we know that that trauma is stored in the body, and we need to get it out of the body. So that's it for today. We're done with this segment on the symptoms of complex PTSD. Next time we're going to just quickly go over, I just have one page on the physiological stress responses to fear that cause spontaneous age regression. And we'll just talk briefly about that next time. And I'm really looking forward to getting into how to cope with these spontaneous age regression incidences, because this booklet is really how to spot them and how to identify what they are. And then we're going to get into, how do you cope right in the moment when it's happening. So you all have a great day, and I will be talking to you soon, and I'll be thinking of you. God bless.